Drink beer, it's good for you. I'm empty-handed and I'm feeling blue, and I'm gonna drink till the day that I die.
Hello and welcome to the video. In this video I will be revealing everything Brut IPA. For those of you that are unfamiliar with this beer style, let me explain. This style is a very hoppy one that is also extremely dry, and it's highly carbonated like a champagne. It is growing in popularity on a wild scale and is certainly something for you to try, particularly if you like IPAs in general. I am providing my method and recipe for this style in this video, but for those of you that want to understand the recipe and method, the following guidelines should be used when preparing and brewing this style. Firstly, you will need to use an enzyme that will allow your yeast to attenuate very high. These can be bought from homebrew stores in various different shapes and sizes. A final gravity close to neutral or less is desirable for this beer style. Because of this, the grain bill needs to be simple and light in colour. You need to totally avoid crystal or caramel malts, lactose and dextrins also, because they will not allow the desired fully dry end gravity that is totally trademarked to this style. The alpha amylase enzyme will aid in the conversion of fermentable sugars. There is nothing new here. This enzyme has been used in commercial stouts, for example, for a long time to allow more dryness. One important decision to make, however, is actually when to add this enzyme. Firstly, we can add it in the mash. This method allows us to control the activity with time and temperature. This enzyme will be denatured after temps above 70 degrees C or 158 degrees Fahrenheit. The downside here, of course, is that you are limiting the time that this enzyme can do its job. A more popular method then would be to add it in your fermentation vessel during fermentation. This will allow the enzyme to work away for a longer period, and the end result will be a lower gravity in the end. Just be sure when you're doing cleanup of your fermenter after fermentation that you use water that is above 70 degrees C to ensure there are no traces left of the enzyme. This could affect future brews. It is unlikely, but just to be safe. Let's now move on to how we use hops in this style. IBU wise, this needs to be kept very low to be to style. Late and post boil hop additions are always going to be large. Fruity hops work very well in this particular style, and my favourite so far to use is Mosiac for each addition. This is also a style that lends itself extremely well to those super fruity New Zealand hops. Yeast wise, you want a very clean, high attenuating yeast. US-05 is ideal for this. This style is in no way about yeast taste. Hops are the showcase. Be bold with them. Carbonation is also a key area of this style. I would recommend between 3 to 3.5 CO2 volumes. Be careful on the bottles you use for this one. Avoid recycled brewery bottles, as they could well crack under that level of pressure. Champagne bottles are going to be an ideal thing, but adding this to a keg is really the best way to go to my mind. So here is my recipe. Please note that this recipe can be found in this video's description and also on the Grainfather Recipe Tools database. Do note that this recipe is for just 10 litres or 2.64 US gallons. If you wish to brew a different amount, then please see my video on this channel for recipe resizing. Do note that like all beer recipe calculations, these are all estimates and should be viewed as such. This is simply down to the amount of variables in brewing. Let's now have a look at the grain bill behind this one, and I will explain it. The Pilsner malt is representing 80% of our grist and is responsible for the malt backbone of flavour in this brew. Naturally, most of this will be hidden by hops, but it does offer a nice balance. It's rather unusual, but in this case the Pilsner malt will be the only part of our grist that will add colour. The flaked corn, or maize as some refer to it, produces a milder flavour and delivers gravity without producing more body in the beer. It has zero influence on colour. For the remaining 10% of the grist, or the grain bill, we have flaked rice. The flaked rice is even less flavourful than corn or maize. It also delivers gravity without producing more body, nor does it have an influence on colour. It will contribute a smoother texture to the end beer. So let's now move on to the brew itself. Usually at this point of the video I would then move through each step giving similar guidelines. I've begun to realise that this repetition is not needed. For those that want a detailed step-by-step guide to the brewing process, please refer to my video shown on the screen now. So here is some video footage of this brew. After adding all my grain and giving it a final stir, I started my mash, only to notice that I had a fair amount of foam forming. Clearly the pump was sucking in some air, no big deal, but I wanted to find out why, of course. Firstly I checked my recirculation arm, only to find that it was not attached fully, so after removing it and reattaching it properly, all was fine. If this happens to you, then there are essentially 3 things to check, and I now will list those in order that I suggest you use them in. Firstly, check the arm is fitted correctly. It's actually quite easy to put this on wrong, as I have already demonstrated here today. Also check that the O-rings are all well in place between the recirculation arm and the recirculation pipe. If neither of these are the issue, then chances are your mash water is not fluid enough and you will need to add some more. Make sure you remember to subtract it from your sparge later on. The third option should be very apparent while you mash in, so if you feel you lack the right consistency in your mash, then do not be concerned over adding some more water. In terms of the mash temperature for this one, I prefer this style mashed low. I've experimented with all sorts of mash schedules, and this 1 hour at 62 degrees C mash, to my mind at least, tastes the best in the end. I would suggest you do your own experimentation, of course. We all have a slightly different palate after all. While the mash was taking place, I started preparing my fermenter. Usually I would empty my fermenter of cleaning product into a bucket and then tip it into something, but after moving house my brewing area now has a bath. I am finding this to be super handy in general, this being one of the many labour saving benefits. Despite actually moving into a much smaller house, I have gained a man cave, and that's pretty cool, and I've also got a reasonable sized room for brewing storage. Back to the brew now, and the sparge on this recipe was just over 5 litres, and I timed this at about 12 minutes. Sure, I could have done this much faster, but I doubt my numbers would have been smiling so brightly if I had. One thing is for sure though, this was a very steamy sparge. The boil was no different, as you can see here. Being a bathroom, it has an extractor fan, and I also had the window open. You will note that I have opted for a 30-minute boil here. This is because there really is no point in anything longer. This beer style, as we established earlier, does not require much of an IBU, and after much experimentation with the style, I feel it benefits with just 2 hob additions in the boil. The first being at 15 minutes and the second being at 0. Like a New England IPA, this style is all about big late additions and a big dry hop. Because I had a short boil, there really was not much time to get a head start on my cleaning, but I did what I could, anything to save time later on. Priority, however, needs to go to your fermenter, so here I am adding star san before giving it a good shake up ready for my wort. I tend to add about 10 litres of star san to this fermenter because it's still light enough to give it a good shake, but it'll also give you good coverance. So it's now 0 minutes and in goes my 0 minute hop addition. Then comes my favourite part. Yep, it's the whirlpool. I've done lots of experimentation with whirlpooling, and my findings suggest that an optimum time to do this, when done in this way with a drill of course, is between 3 to 5 minutes. Anything longer has been found to be pointless. After you do your whirlpool, the important thing to do is to let the brew stand for about 15 minutes. Here I have added the lid and put a towel over the top. This is so no insects can find their way into my wort and spoil it. Let me talk you through the important facts about whirlpooling, because there seems to be an awful lot of confusion, if I'm honest. Firstly, as I have already stated, after you've whirlpooled, you need to let everything find its way to the bottom of your brewing system after the whirlpool, and of course to do this you need to do a stand. If you do not do this, then part of the effect of the whirlpool is lost. The main reason to whirlpool is to separate the wort from the trub, which will actually aid in beer clarity. Because we are leaving this time, this also means that effectively you're also getting a 15-minute hop stand. I do this no matter what the style is. The last reason to whirlpool, in actual fact, is for the sake of your pump and filter. If you get a block, then simply apply a bicycle pump or similar to either the recirculation pipe or walt-out hose of your counterflow chiller and give it a few pumps. It will be unblocked in seconds. After this, I set up my pre-sanitized counterflow chiller and watch the temperature using the wortometer. The first fermentation temperature that I will use will be 18 degrees C, but I will also be doing some aeration before pitching my yeast, so I am aiming for a temperature of 20 degrees C before sanitizing my wort. And there it is. It's now time to transfer directly into my fermenter. While my wort was transferring, I cleaned my paddle to ready it for aeration. Here it is in a container filled with star san, the final process, alongside everything else that I need to sanitize for fermentation. As you can see, I've added this to my brew bath. This will ensure that I cannot kick it over. Surely. I then gave the wort a good aeration for 5 minutes before pitching my enzyme and yeast. As you can see here, I am still a sprinkler and I still aerate my wort. Within a couple of hours of pitching, I began to see activity, and that's always nice to see. My tilt agreed with my hydrometer with a starting gravity of 1.054, which of course is 4 points over what I was looking for, but hey. I also found that my pitching temp was 20 degrees C, which is a couple of degrees more than I was looking for, but wow, in a little time my glycol chiller fixed that. Despite this being a 10-litre batch, the cooling still works. It's just not as fast as it is with 19-litre plus batches. All there is to do now is wait and see if that magic happens. In past brews I've ended up with a final gravity of just above neutral. I predict that this one will go down to a maximum of 1.004, with a result around 1.001 or 2 more likely. Let's see. Naturally, a beer of this style is not really about balance as such, so as long as you don't move too far away from these predictions and go too high in alcohol, then your brew will be fine. So this wraps this one up. I hope you all enjoyed the new format that I have used here for a brew day video. Please do let me know your thoughts. Above all, I hope you found the video to be useful, interesting and enjoyable. So if you did like this video, then please do like it on YouTube. This really helps me out and allows the videos to be seen by a wider audience on YouTube. I have always got a lot of new videos planned for the future, so if you are interested in seeing my new content, then please subscribe for future content. If you have any questions on anything that I have covered in this video or any other video, then please do not hesitate to get in touch with me via YouTube or Facebook. I'm a member of pretty much every Grainfather Facebook group and more. Happy brewing!